We wait 365 days for this game, and here it is, and here it's gone. And Michigan made a statement, to say the least. We got Justin Rowe on the line, Blue by 90. Please check him out there, and Wolverine.plus as well. Justin, I should probably shut up for the next 20 minutes and just let you talk.
I tell you what, I've done a lot of shows, but there are two of my favorite days or weeks of the year that I've been able to do shows, and today is one of those. I'll be honest. So it's tough to talk about when you lose this game, but when you win this game, you can't shut up about it.
Well, I'll get you started this way. If somebody that knows Ohio State and Michigan and how they play would have been given a stat sheet at halftime and they saw the rushing, I know the rushing at one point was 115-1, and halftime was like 124-10, Ohio State side. And then you would have known, well, the other team hit they got shut down the whole first half, but they hit two big pass plays to stay in the game. Well, I would have said, well, that's Ohio State and that's Michigan, but it was the other way around. And it's just kind of odd going to halftime. I felt like Ohio State, like if you charted every play and said, who won this play? Who won this play? Like Ohio State won like 90% of the plays, and Michigan gashed them huge twice to stay in the game. And then the second half was completely different.
Ohio State played like Michigan usually does, and Michigan played like Ohio State usually does. I couldn't fathom it. It was one of those things where Michigan has never hit on those deep balls. They have never hit on those big plays. The game plan for the last 2 years has been to just round and pound. We slow you down. We slowly tear you down until we beat you. And that was not what happened. And I think it did end up, the reason why Donovan Edwards got two big plays at the end was because they did do that. And JJ's, that touchdown was a 13-play drive that they did. They sucked the life out of them a little bit. But if you would have told me, to your point, that one team would have five plays of, 50-plus yards, it was 100% going to be Ohio State, 100%. And so that's where it was just shocking to how this came out. But I mean, ultimately, I was just so thoroughly impressed at the mental toughness of this Michigan team, where you start off the game with field goal, punt. You have those two punt drives. They had 6 plays for 4 yards. Nothing's working. You're in the shoe. The place is going crazy. You've got a sophomore quarterback in his first start. Most of these guys have never played in the shoe. Guess what? They didn't flinch. They had no issues with that, and they kept on going, and they turned the tide for themselves. That's what I was most impressed with on Saturday.
Yeah, we can look at the stat sheet and we all watch the game, and many will watch it multiple times depending on your perspective, and Michigan fans mostly in that category. But to try to get into the psyche of, you're talking about very talented teams that should match up in a certain way, and the final score is 45-23. So if anybody just looks at that, they think Michigan blew them out, which they did in the fourth quarter. They were dominant. Except for Ohio State still had some opportunities there. They drove it down to like the 5-yard line, and then CJ Stroud threw that inexplicable Brett Favre kind of toss that deflected, and Upshaw intercepted. They had a 4th and foot that I would love to get the truth out of Ryan Day. It's your 1st and 35 because you had a stupid knucklehead penalty on the sideline. And then also had, I believe, a couple false starts or whatever the infraction was to set them back to 1st and 35. And they battle all the way back to get that to a manageable, 4th and 4. And they're an aggressive team in just regular games, and they're losing by 2 scores. It's still a game, but I think it's 31-20 at that point. They got it on the plus side. They've just worked it for 32 yards, and they punt.
That was, first of all, the crowd. I was there. They booed them. And I think it was validated, honestly. I think that was a valid boo, because to me, that moment right there felt like things changed in the mindset of everybody on that Ohio State sideline and in the crowd, where it was, I don't know if we can do this, whereas if you go for it and, you get that, I think it's a boost of confidence and you're like, we can go do this. It doesn't matter. We can go finish this game and get out of here. But I was astonished at that play call for them to punt. And going back to what you talked about, having the opportunities, even in that fourth quarter, the last 2 years, the key to Michigan winning this game was playing defense in the red zone. Up until this game, I believe the stat that I got from PFF was Ohio State had scored on 52 of 54 red zone appearances. And I think it was like 90% of those were touchdowns. And so the fact that Michigan held them to a field goal still in that first quarter, they got turnovers in the red zone. They didn't let them score every time. It's something that Ohio State has been so good about against every other team in the last 2 years except for Michigan, and that's been the difference in this game.
When you put that fourth down decision into light, it's just strategically, it doesn't make any sense, regardless of your confidence factor or what you think about your quarterback and receiver. Strategically, it doesn't make any sense. You're putting the ball back in the hands of a team that's got a 2-score lead. And there's I don't remember the time, 8-10 minutes left, something like that. So you're starting to get squeezed by time. But even on top of just the metrics, you're Ohio State. You put full confidence in your quarterback and receivers to make plays when they have to, and you just drove it 30-some yards in 3 plays. It makes
easily
absolutely no sense.
Absolutely no sense. And I think here's what a lot of Buckeye fans are probably thinking is that Urban Meyer goes for that 10 times out of 10, right? And that's where they think that's where the questioning of Ryan Day comes in, I believe.
All right, focus back on Michigan. And of course, my goodness, Donovan Edwards didn't carry the ball the week before. One of his great attributes is being a threat out of the backfield as a pass receiver. That's taken away from him. He's got 2 big casts, especially on his right hand. But hey, just as long as he could kind of grasp the football, wow, did he deliver?
Unbelievable. I think, you go into this game as a Michigan fan, and I was sitting there in the stands and I watched Blake Corum come off after 2 plays, and we're all thinking, shit, now what? We hadn't been moving the ball already. So now you're thinking, what are we going to do? Who are we going to turn to? And then JJ McCarthy just said, I'll wear it. I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm going to do what it takes to get the game done. And that's what he did. And then Donovan Edwards, they really still, to the point of the stats that you rattled off right at the beginning, at halftime for those rush yards and all that stuff. The run game wasn't working well in the first half, but they wore him down, and Donovan Edwards, all he needs is a little hole, and that man is showing that he's a 5-star that can take off. So I was shocked at how well that team responded to a lot of adversity, and to how JJ McCarthy specifically, I really want to give him the props. The stat line's not going to show it, right? He's at 50%. He made some mistakes, but for a true sophomore in his first big game on the road as a starter, just phenomenal for what he was able to do. He fixed the mistakes that he had made before as well, where he didn't overthrow that deep ball. Obviously, 10, 15 yards of separation helps that, but he fixed those mistakes a lot, and was able just to be the leader. I think there's one thing too, with a comparison of CJ Stroud to JJ McCarthy. JJ McCarthy is unequivocally the leader of that team, and he wears it. And you can tell in the way they respond to him and the way he goes about himself. I'm not sure that CJ Stroud is that guy. He's an unbelievable talent. He can throw the ball for 400 yards when you need him to. But is he the guy that's going to rally the troops to win a game when you need him to?
That's a great point, Justin, because the quarterback is put in the position of leadership, whether he's a natural leader or has developed to be a leader or not. He just has to be one. Whereas, I watched the the post game with the Michigan players, and I've seen, a number of cuts of JJ McCarthy in the past, but specifically after this game, both at the podium and a few other, and just, the person, and obviously it's easier to project all this after you just won the biggest game of your life, but still you can just tell he's just an engaging personality. He's just exuberant. He's just, kind of commands the room. And, if he was playing guard, he would be one of the leaders on the team. But if you play quarterback, you have to be that guy. I don't want to question CJ Stroud. I don't know what happens in the locker room, but he just doesn't give up that vibe. But playing the position he does, you're supposed to be the leader.
Yeah, and I think that's where, I agree with you. I have no idea. I've never talked to CJ Stroud in my life. I have no idea. I'm just going off of a perception of what I see on the field. I don't see him in practice. He could be the best leader, in that locker room. And some guys are just don't show it, But I was going off of some body language and things that I've seen from him, especially in that game. But speaking on JJ McCarthy, you want to talk about a guy that just thrives on the pressure. You have your Heisman candidate that's out for that game, right? Your guy that you've handed the ball to, you've relied on for your offense for a lot this year. And what has he done? Blake has done unbelievable things. So with him going out, sometimes you would think a 19-year-old sophomore quarterback in his first time in one of the most hostile environments in all of college football, that's a tough situation to be thrown into. And you're down at halftime. You're going toe-to-toe with these guys. He answered the bell every single time. And it was really just it was unbelievable. And again, he wasn't perfect, but he didn't need to be. And it was a total team win too. I think, I've talked about JJ McCarthy, talked about Donovan Edwards, all those things. The defense was just phenomenal. Even when Stroud had 10 seconds to throw, they had cover sacks in that second half. He had nowhere to go a lot of the time. And then, you talk about the defensive line just still getting to him in the end of there, and that offensive line just going at it at the end in that fourth quarter, creating holes the size of a U-Haul for Donovan Edwards to go through.
Yeah, it was a complete victory. It had to be a complete victory. And, I don't know what the perfect quotient of leaders versus followers need to be on a team, but this seems to be a team of, when you've got different individual units working by themselves, I would think that it's good to have a lot of leaders on that team. And it seems as though they do. Oluwatimi seems to be, they did a focused on him a lot during the broadcast. And we've talked about the difference that he's made for an offensive line that was already arguably the best in the country, that they've even taken it to a next level. He seems to be a great leader as well. And the defense seems to be flooded with them in the absence of all the stars that left the defense last year.
Yeah, I mean, the leadership is there, and it's something that in 2019 and 2020, I don't think it was quite there. I think that it was something that was missing, and that's where I'm going to give props to Jim Harbaugh the most, for him changing his tune a little bit, fixing the things that he needed to fix, and focusing on some areas. The main one being leadership, where he is, I don't know what he did. I don't know, I know some things, but I don't know how he so dramatically changed it. But I think you have to say good things about Jim Harbaugh and what he's been able to do, because you look at it, he lost his offensive coordinator. He lost his defensive coordinator. He lost 12 out of 22 starters. He was, he did the whole Vikings thing and came back and people were, very critical of that. What did he do after all of that, after losing all that, after going through drama? He came out, goes 12-0, goes and beats Ohio State in Columbus for the first time in 22 years. I mean, that's pretty damn impressive.
It sure is. It's quite a story, looking at both just the Michigan side in and amongst itself, but then putting the combination of the rivalry together and how it's flipped, because it hasn't flipped because Ohio State has stopped recruiting or Michigan's not recruiting at the same level it was, that there's some slight separation between the two. It's more about preparation, development, leadership, all those intangibles that are going into this.
Yeah, and I think he's put the right people around these kids now. It wasn't about let's go get. This is where I love the story of and I don't want to hate on Jim Knowles. I think he's still a pretty damn good coach as well. But the stat of there are some tweets out there from Ohio State fans when both Jim Knowles and when Jesse Minter were hired. Jim Knowles coached the number 5 defense in the nation at Oklahoma State, right? That's a sexy hire for Ohio State fans. That's looking at it like, all right, we're fixing the defense, right? We're gonna get this out. Jesse Minter coached the 118th defense in the nation at Vanderbilt. Mark, I remember us talking about that hire in the summer when we were like, what is really going on? Jim Harbaugh did not go for the sexy hire. He went for the one that worked for his team and he thought was going to be the perfect hire to be in Ann Arbor and in Schembechler. And I have to give him props for that because it was not a splash hire when you needed one after Mike McDonald and you're trying to do it. It was he's looking internally what kind of guys does he want in that building ready to go to war for his team.
Yeah, and that's a mark of a great leader is being able to recognize talent and leadership ability in others and then surround yourself with those people. And yeah, it's easy to go out. And I'm not saying that this is all there was to the Ohio State hire was to say, who's the best defensive coordinator available? Let's look at the stat sheet. Okay, 5th best in the country and the other 4 dudes aren't leaving. So that's the guy we got to go get. I'm sure it was much more extensive than that. But to your point, going and grabbing a Vanderbilt defensive coordinator, well, obviously there are obvious limitations there at Vanderbilt. So it was an intense look into who is this guy? Does he really know what he's doing? We can't look at the stats and look at the performance of the defense because he's playing against the best teams in the country with, one arm tied behind his back. So who is this guy? And obviously Jim Harbaugh made the right selection.
Absolutely. You have to give props to them in that hiring decision. I think the same thing with Matt Weiss as well. I want to give him props. So you got Sharon Moore and Matt Weiss as co-offensive coordinators making that work. That's not an easy situation where you've got one guy calling the run plays, one guy calling the pass plays, and then Jim Harbaugh giving his input as well. That's not easy. And they made that work as well somehow I looked, Ohio State's given up 40 plus only 4 times in the last 4 years. One of them was to Alabama in the national championship. One of them was to Utah in the Rose Bowl, and the other 2 are to Michigan. So what Michigan's been able to do against on offense against Ohio State has been pretty dang impressive.